Drew Finland is alleging that basically the government has built its whole entire case on the lyrics from a Babyface Wayne song that my mixtapes and OTF edits, who are not ran by Lil Durk, Durk don't even know these cats, that they decided to put this clip of Quando Rondo crying, screaming no when he seen a little cousin laid out on the ground. They're saying that Durk basically came out with that song afterwards and used that news clip and put it out there. And it's funny because when it happened, everybody on the internet, including me, was like, bruh, ain't no way in hell Durk did this. This is stupid. Why would you post this? Not knowing, bruh, that song was done 7 months before that even happened. Drew Finland's whole entire case is y'all gave this to the grand jury. And since y'all gave it to the grand jury, it tainted the whole entire thing because we wouldn't even be here had they not heard those lyrics and had y'all not lied on the lyrics. Y'all didn't do anything as far as clearing it up, seeing exactly when the lyrics were done, looking up the engineer, none of that stuff. So because you guys were lackadaisical, and this is why they tell y'all, take it to trial. All that over 95%, oh yeah, the feds gonna get you, the feds gonna get you. Well, that happens because the feds pile up a lot of BS. Everybody who says that also says the same phrase. The feds don't fight fair. They fight dirty. And since they fight dirty, this is what they did. That song, there's no way in hell that song included Quando Rondo screaming like that. But you gotta be one of the dumbest people on earth. Now, if they would have said, you know what, that didn't matter, we'll get rid of that, then cool. But the problem is the government, the feds, decided to double down on it. They like, nah, this is real. So now what happens is we can go ahead and bring in the evidence. So what the feds are going to have to do is compel their own person to go ahead and look at when the actual song was created. So that way they can say, all right, you know what? This is cool. This is true. But there's things that Drew is missing and Drew didn't bring up. I know kind of the reason why. There's other songs that they're using. Then Drew has to sit around and have to figure out, which I know this part is kind of easy to do. Drew will be able to bring up through his witnesses, because he has to have one of these guys, one of the label people, heads that clears the checks. Lil Durk got a $20 million deal. Lil Durk is basically a label head of his own label. Now, instead of giving guys money, you can give them that credit card. You give them that OTF credit card, what you can do, tax write-off. So no longer am I giving people direct cash. I'm giving people this credit card to use. If I give you the credit card, I write it off, we all good. Now I know what you're spending. I can cut off your spending limit. I can increase the spending limit, all of that crap. Now, the hard part that he's going to have is the fact that the feds are going to try to make a case about subtle innuendos and slang used. Now, what I'm known for as far as motto goes, I always say I ain't gonna hold you. So imagine if a homie of mine decided, hey, bruh, somebody that I don't like, they strangled them. But beforehand, I had signed that person to my company and I let them use this card. This is called a fuel card, but the fuel card also allows you to make other purchases. The feds can say, Seti Nash said, I ain't gonna hold you, is slang for saying he's not gonna strangle you with his bare hands. He got other people to do it. Mind you, that's really me saying, I'm not gonna hold you up, I'm gonna proceed on forward. That's what that means when I say it. I just made it so succinct, meaning smaller words. But the feds can say, if I know anybody and they had some money with me, And I basically made a song months ago about people getting choked out. If I tell the little homie to choke you out, he gonna do it. That right there can get me wrapped up. Just that easy. And that's what Drew is going to do as far as fighting the case for Lil Durk. The question is, can he paint it that way and they believe it? I don't believe that they're going to drop the indictment, though he did make a hell of a case. But there are other factors that Drew purposely left out, because what Drew is trying to do is get rid of those lyrics first. And how he works out. He works it out in a way, and you've seen this with Golden versus California when he beat the feds already with NBA Youngboy, and he beat the state in Utah when he did his Pro Hoc Vice in Utah, and when he did it already with, I can't even think of the name. Anyways, this is what Drew does. He finds these little things, make a big old deal out of it, so then they start knocking stuff out, and he has good favor, good standing with the judge. That's just what he does. It just is what it is. But hey, man, y'all seen that, but check out the whole entire indictment right here. I just gave y'all a synopsis. United States District Court, Central District of California, United States versus Derek Banks. Defendant Dirk Banks, that's not even Derek Banks, I don't know why I said that, through his counsel of record, moves the court to dismiss the superseding indictment against him in this matter. In the alternative, he moves to compel disclosure of the grand jury minutes and evidence the government presented to the grand jury. They basically talking about that song that got put there. This motion is based on the attached memorandum of points and authorities, all files and records in this case, and such evidence is argument as may be presented at the hearing. The undersigned and the assigned assistant United States attorneys and his matter had a meet and confer regarding this matter via email correspondence on April 17, 2025, as required by the court's criminal standing order and the local rules reflected herein. The parties did not reach an agreement on the issues presented herein. Basically saying that we want certain things thrown out, and they said we ain't going for none of that. And it came out today, April 18, 2025. So I'm not really going to trip off of the... Actually, maybe I should. Introduction, background, original indictment, superseding indictment, underlying falsehood. Basically, Drew Fillon is like this. And this is why Drew Fillon is the $1 billion lawyer. That month said underlying falsehood. He's basically saying, y'all lying. Then the argument. The court has the power to dismiss an indictment that the grand jury returned based on information that the government knew at the time to be or later learned to have been false. And I think they're going to be talking about a bunch of lyrics. The false information presented to the grand jury here compels the superseding indictment's dismissal. The false information prejudiced Mr. Banks in the grand jury proceedings. The court should dismiss the indictment because the government presented false evidence to the jury. Bro, this is BTA right here. If the court is uncertain whether the false information that the government presented to the grand jury requires dismissal, the court should order the government to produce transcripts and evidence from the grand jury's proceedings. And then number 4, conclusion. Table of authorities, Bank of Nova Scotia versus United States. We ain't finna do all that. It ain't even necessary. All right. Let me make sure I get my water in, because it's about to be a read. Memorandum of Points and Authorities Introduction. The government presented false evidence to the grand jury that indicated Mr. Banks on November 7, 2024, document number 7. The plain language of the superseding indictment makes it apparent that the government told the grand jury that Mr. Banks, through specific lyrics in his music, celebrated and profited from a revenge murder that he had ordered, namely that SR, that's basically Lil Pop, in August 2022. That claim is demonstrably false. The song the government relied upon as evidence against Mr. Banks, Wonderful Wayne, and Jackie Boy. A song was recorded by another artist, Babyface Ray, and on which Mr. Banks recorded a feature for, could not have been a commercialization of Mr. Banks' alleged murder for hire of SR, and the government represented to the grand jury. That is because Mr. Banks recorded the lyrics for Wonderful Wayne 7 months the incident never even happened. The government's misrepresentation in the superseding indictment, whether knowing or reckless, undermines the integrity of the grand jury's true bill against Mr. Banks. The court should dismiss the superseding indictment against him as a result. So they said because they basically gave him the wrong song, which was recorded 7 months before the incident, that they need to go ahead and drop it off. Drew letting his nuts hang. Background. Mr. Banks is a highly successful and internationally renowned recorded artist and performer who is known professionally by the name Lil Durk. His music and resulting public acclaim have been reaching wide audiences since the release of his debut album in 2015. That's cap, but all right. Although his He has built his professional reputation and profile as a dedicated, hardworking, deeply talented artist beginning around 2012 through mixtapes and public performances in and around Chicago. Since the initial album, Mr. Banks has released a total of 8 solo studio albums, not including his mixtapes or collaborative projects he has done with other artists. Mr. Banks has been nominated for a Grammy on 4 occasions, winning 1 last year. And keeping common industry practice, Mr. Banks has been signed to music labels, currently Alamo Records, who have helped him facilitate his musical growth and has spearheaded the efforts surrounding the production, release, and distribution of his music. Also, in keeping with common industry practice, hip-hop artists not only release their own music, but also frequently lend their musical talents to other artists' songs through features, which are often verse or two contained within a song. The addition of a feature from a more popular artist can help boost the visibility and ultimately success of a song, especially for newer or emerging talent. Relevant to the matter at hand, Mr. Banks has recorded a feature for Babyface Ray on Wonderful Wayne. Upon Babyface Ray's request, the song in question was ultimately attributed to Babyface Ray with a feature credit to Mr. Banks. Mr. Banks recorded his portion of the song in January of 2022, that being his last involvement in this song. Further production was done by producers and other industry professionals, but no changes to content or lyrics were ever made by Mr. Banks or anyone else associated with Mr. Banks. All of this information was readily available to the government outside of the 4 corners of the superseding indictment, but important to this court's consideration of the egregiousness of the government's conduct and necessity of the relief contained in this motion. The issue of timing of these lyrics was addressed by undersigned defense counsel at Mr. Banks' detention hearing on December 12, 2024. The counter of this argument, counsel for the government posted to the court that even if the lyrics themselves were written several months prior to the charged conduct, a version of the song was modified that added audio from a news clip of TB. TB is Tyquane Bowman, aka Quando Rondo, on top of the original song. Following this assertion at the detention hearing, and unaware of any such modification attributable to Mr. Banks, undersigned counsel asked the government to provide what they were referring to in this email correspondence. The government replied with videos that appear to be taken from recent open source YouTube searches that were in no way connected to Mr. Banks. This further complicates what evidence, argument, and instructions the government presented to the grand jury and will be addressed in more specificity below. The issue of timing of Mr. Banks' recording of the lyrical verse in question is not one of frivolous or inconsequential value. It is quite the opposite. The government's misrepresentations about the creation and meaning of Wonderful Wayne and the linchpin of the superseding indictment theory of Mr. Banks' guilt. Indeed, the superseding indictment features it prominently. Following the attempted murder of TB and the murder of SR, defendant Banks sought to commercialize SR's death by rapping about his revenge on TB with music that explicitly references audio from a news clip taken shortly after SR's murder, where TB screamed, "No! No!" after seeing SR's dead body. Superseding indictment, page number 6, document 27 at 3, 9, and 11. It is, in fact, the only material allegation that does not appear in the original indictment. What? Which does not charge Mr. Banks, but appears in the superseding indictment, which does charge him. Whoa. Whoa. That's crazy. The original indictment, Mr. Banks was not charged in the original indictment. Instead, the indictment charged 5 other individuals: Kevon Grant, DeAndre Wilson, Keith Jones, David Lindsay, and Asa Houston. Bro, I didn't even know about the other person. What the hell? What the hell? As principals in an alleged murder for hire scheme in violation of 18 U.S.C. 1958A and 92.4C 1A 3B2 and J1. At the core of the charges, it is the August 19, 2022 shooting and death of SR. According to the grand jury, SR was not the men's intended target. TB was. Their purported motive, a bounty placed on TB to answer for his involvement with the murder of another man, DB, Davon Bennett, a.k.a. King Von. Nearly 2 years prior, outside of an Atlanta nightclub, the indictment alleges that King Von was a high-ranking member of Only the Family, or OTF, an organization that produces hip-hop music from artists primarily from Chicago. It avers that Grant, Wilson, Houston, and unnamed co-conspirators 1 through 5 were also members or associates of OTF. It alleges that OTF associates used credit cards associated with OTF to purchase the defendant's plane tickets and rent their Los Angeles hotel room. It alleges that the bounty consisted of money and lucrative music opportunities with OTF. The person who was alleged to have offered the bounty, co-conspirator 1, goes unnamed and uncharged. After King Von's murder, co-conspirator 1 made it clear in coded language that co-conspirator 1 I would pay a bounty or a monetary reward and or make payment to anyone who took part in killing the TB for his role. King Von's murder. Document 1 at 2. Also CID at 4-5. The same unnamed individual, co-conspirator 1, is alleged to have text co-conspirator 3 the day before the murder. Don't book no flights under no names involved with me. According to the original indictment, the day before SR's death, the 5 named co-defendants, along with an unnamed co-conspirator, flew from other states to California, convened in Los Angeles, California hotel room, purchased ski masks and secured 2 sedans, and armed themselves with guns, including one modified to operate as a fully automatic machine gun. The next day, on August 19, 2022, the 6 men tailed the Escalade in which both TB and SR were passengers through the streets of Los Angeles until they ultimately stopped at a Beverly Boulevard gas station. There, 3 of the men fired their guns in the Escalade's direction, ultimately killing SR. The superseding indictment does charge Mr. Banks in an alleged murder for hire. It names him as the individual, references co-conspirator 1 in the original indictment, and calls him the head of OTF as having directed the attempted murder of TB that resulted in SR's death, as the person who placed the alleged bounty on TB, and as soon as the person who takes instructions not to put no flights under no names involved with me. In addition, naming Mr. Banks. Importantly, the superseding indictment contains only one new material alleged fact that the original indictment does not. It avers that after the shooting, Mr. Banks celebrated his successful revenge through his music. Following the attempted murder of TB and a murder of SR, defendant Banks sought to commercialize SR's death by rapping about his revenge on TB with music that explicitly references audio from a news clip taken from SR's murder, with TB screaming, "No! No!" after seeing SR's dead body. Told me they got an Eddie, go, go. Got a location, go, go. Green light, go, 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 go. Look at your son on the news, go, go, go. You screaming, no, no, pussy. Quoting Wonderful Wayne and Jackie Boy. The underlying falsehood for the superseding indictment's allegations about the meaning of Banks' lyrics that they describe SR's killing and reference media about it, Banks would need to have penned them after the August 19, 2022 shooting. Mr. Banks did not, however, write those lines after the shooting. He wrote them several months beforehand. Attached as Exhibit 1 to the motion is a declaration of Justin Gibson, the producer and sound engineer who recorded Wonderful Wayne and Jackie Boy, the song where the cited lyrics originally appeared. Gibson recorded Banks' verse, which Banks wrote and recorded simultaneously during his recording session on January 25th, 2022. Gibson unloaded the track at 5:39 p.m. that evening, saved it at 6:33 p.m., and finalized it at 7:21 p.m. Hey, he was getting busy. He needed to record some master. He basically mastered Lil Durk's whole entire stuff in 2 hours. But I mean, it's Lil Durk. At the time, Lil Durk was hotter than fish grease, so you definitely want to make sure it's perfect and hurry up and put that out. And unless the government is prosecuting Banks on a theory of extrasensory presence, the lyrics could not have soundly informed the grand jury's finding of probable cause. Attached as Exhibit 2 is the declaration of Ahmad Sharif, the founder and CEO of Your Music World Incorporated. Mr. Sharif works as a music producer and audio engineer for artists including Babyface Ray and Mr. Banks. Mr. Sharif attests that he received Mr. Banks' verse and lyrics, Wonderful Wayne and Jackie Boy, from Mr. Gibson on July 22nd, 2022. After that date, he received no additional lyrics or modifications to the song lyrics from Mr. Banks or anyone else in his camp. Thereafter, on August 23rd, 2022, Mr. Sharif incorporated Mr. Banks' verse into the track and finalized the track on his end. Additionally, Mr. Sharif reviewed the open source YouTube links that were provided, email correspondence by the government as examples of videos they referenced in a detention hearing, and can confirm the audio and video clips featuring audio of an individual yelling, "No!" reportedly from a news clip are not from the original recording. He identifies those clips to be fan edits for social media platforms and are altered, fabricated, or inauthentic versions of the original song. The original authentic verse of the song, Mr. Sharif confirms, does not contain these manipulated elements. He attests that creating altered audio edits is easy to do through social media platforms, and such practices often result in misinformation and misrepresentation of original pieces of music and art. Argument: the superseding indictment is not sustainable against Mr. Banks in the face of the fundamental factual error upon which the grand jury relied. Such an error requires dismissal of the indictment under the following circumstances. First, where the grand jury returned an indictment based on the government's knowing presentation of a falsehood to United States versus Kennedy. And you know good and damn well I will on a whole nother date. Then he got Napier versus Illinois, Glossop versus Oklahoma. Y'all know Drew coming with it. When Drew come with it, Drew don't have just like one source to fight it. Drew had like 3, 4, 5 of them. This is why he the best lawyer in America. or second, where falsehood, if unwittingly present to the grand jury, is of such character that it is later discovery demands redress. See United States versus Samango, United States versus Brusalo. The court has the power to dismiss an indictment that the grand jury returned based on information that the government knew at the time to be or later learned to have been false. That's important because they basically said that, bruh, after y'all found this out, y'all still decided to go ahead with this. We sat y'all in a room. We try to give y'all grace. And this is why when Drew get in those courtrooms and get in behind those walls, this is how he did it with the YFN stuff. And this is how he did it with the NBA Youngboy stuff in Utah. When he find y'all did one little thing wrong, bro, he want to blow the whole thing up. I'm telling y'all, Lil Durk, if he face any time, it is not going to be for no murder. Guaranteed. He probably do some fed time, but he ain't going to be in there for the rest of his life. Guaranteed that. Bet on it. So Mr. Banks does not take lightly the request that he is making of this court dismissal is in all cases a drastic step and thus generally disfavored. He keep on coming. United States versus Rogers, United States versus Blue. That is especially so when a defendant challenges the nature of evidence that the government presented to introduce an indictment. United States versus Claiborne, abrogated on other grounds by United States versus Baker. However, court intervention is necessary in cases like this to ensure that a charging decision is the product of the grand jury's own unbiased and unattained judgment. The grand jury's independence and integrity are deeply rooted in our Constitution. It is an institution of constitutional integrity. United States Constitution, Amendment 5, and it does not belong to any branch of government. United States versus Williams, quoting United States versus Channing. God damn, Drew, you putting belt to ass right now. The grand jury is, in many ways, an entry unto itself. The grand jury's functional independence from the judicial branch is evidenced both in the scope of its power to investigate criminal wrongdoing and in the manner in which that power is exercised. Unlike a court whose jurisdiction is predicated upon a specific case or controversy, the grand jury can investigate merely on suspicion that the law is being violated, or even because it wants assurance that it is not. Williams versus United States, and then United States versus Enterprises. The grand jury's independence is essential to its twin functions, determining whether probable cause exists to charge a crime and standing between the accuser and the accused. When a charge is dictated by an intimidating power or by malice and personal ill will, United States versus Mechanic, United States versus O'Connor J, occurring first side of United States versus Calandra, and then quoting Wood versus Georgia, Accord Bresenberg versus Haynes. Bruh, this man, when Drew get in front of this judge with all this stuff already set up, the Fed's about to look goofy as hell. But I'll hold off. Costello versus United States, holding on that a district court may not dismiss an indictment on the basis that it was returned on hearsay evidence. Line versus United States, disallowing defendants' challenge that an indictment had been returned on evidence obtained in violation of the privilege against self-incrimination. Courts are likewise generally hands-off with the prosecutors who present the government's cases to grand juries. United States versus Williams, holding that a prosecutor has no duty to present exculpatory evidence to the grand jury. United States versus Fuchs, holding on that a prosecutor cannot be compelled to explain the circumstances surrounding the defendants invoking the right to counsel. United States versus Spallone. A prosecutor has no duty of evidence bearing on witness credibility to the grand jury. See also Williams 504. We did not hold Bank versus Nova Scotia, United States. However, bro, I'm not finna read all this shit. Hold on. This ain't nothing but them just citing what they're using. We're not doing that. False information presented at the grand jury compels the superseding indictment dismissal. This indictment assertions about Mr. Banks' lyrics, their timing, their meaning is false. When Banks wrote the cited lyrics, SR's killing was still 7 months in the future. For Banks to have been writing about SR would thus have been impossible. The only question is how much patently false information came to be within the grand jury's purview to begin with. One answer is that the prosecutors who prepared and presented the government's evidence knew that the evidence was false. Another is that the prosecutor who presented the evidence did not know it to be false, but the witness who conveyed it did. And the third answer is that the evidence was obtained and presented with reckless disregard for patently falsity. As explained further below, regardless of the answer, dismissal is warranted, meaning give me my shit. Mr. Banks pauses here to address a threshold issue: materiality. Although a defendant is not usually entitled to relief from an irregularity in grand jury's proceedings, he is where the irregularity resulted in sufficient prejudice. Prejudice is sufficient to require dismissal if it is to establish that a violation substantially influenced the government's decision to indict, or if there is grave doubt that the decision to indict was free from the substantial influence of such violations. Quote mechanic, the false information here easily clears that threshold. As described above, the lyrics were only of two pieces of evidence that the superseding indictment cited against Banks. The other was a text message that discussed the names under the flights should be booked, docket 27 at 7, and it was the only piece of evidence that this, or at the superseding indictment, portrays it at least directly linked to Banks. So they're saying that without that song, none of this shit would exist. Without that song, bruh, that song is basically saying intent, which means them text messages, that's all they got. That's it. Which to me reads as a big ass reach. But we'll get into it. More to the point, the lyrics are one of the only two differences between the superseding indictment, which charged Banks, and the original indictment, which identified him only as conspirator number one, or co-conspirator number one, for the grand jury not to have been substantially influenced by that evidence in its decision to indict is inconceivable. Returning to the matter at hand, court must determine whether the government knew that the assertion regarding Banks' lyrics was false at the time it presented the case, or whether the government subsequently discovered it to be so. If the government knew the evidence to have been false when it was abducted, it had a duty to correct it, which is true. We're not finna go through all these we're just gonna keep on reading. Amended is violated when a defendant has to stand trial on an indictment which the government knows is based partially on prejudiced testimony. When the perjured testimony is material and when jeopardy has not attached, whether the prosecutor learns of any perjury committed before the grand jury, he is under a duty to immediately inform the court and opposing counsel. And if the jury may be material, also the grand jury, in order to appropriate action may be taken. With the court to determine, however, that the prosecutor's duty to correct the false assertion regarding Banks' lyrics is not implicated here, it should still dismiss the indictment. The only way for the court to hold that the prosecutor has no duty to correct the factual error before the grand jury would be for it to find that neither the prosecutor nor the witnesses had no cause to know that they were traveling on a patently wrong inference. But that would mean that neither the prosecution nor any witness took the time to determine whether Banks wrote the lyrics and when he wrote them. Rather, the prosecution appears to assume a connection between the lyrics and the homicide and presented that assumption to the grand jury, having never investigated whether it was plausible. If it is the case, dismissal is proper under the holding in Simango. In Simango, the Ninth Circuit affirmed a district's court dismissal of an indictment because the government had secured it in a manner that seriously threatened the judicial process. Even if prosecutors had not relied on perjury, there the government secured an indictment based on the prosecutors presenting hearing transcripts, which concealed that most of the testimony that the grand jury was to consider came from the prosecutor himself, along with the prosecutor's own impressive repertory of insults and insinuations against the defendant. What? Wow. All right, that's a little crazy. That's crazy as hell. At minimum, government here likewise overstepped, even if unintentionally, to see why I consider the lyrics inclusion in a superseding indictment. The problem there is not the lyrics themselves, but the inference that the superseding indictment expressly drew from them. Such inferences are more often a matter of argument than they are precipient testimony or even witness opinion, and so was more than likely to have been urged by the prosecutor. I gotta close this window because it's raining hard as hell. All right, at the minimum, we already have all that stuff. Independent judgment based on fair presentation of the government's evidence. All signs here point to the prosecution usurping the grand jury's independence with a theory of culpability that could not have been well investigated in the first place. Had it been so, the lyrics would simply not appear in the superseding indictment. Further adding color to the government's position regarding lyrics was the government both changing course and doubling down on their argument regarding the meaning of these lyrics, even when confronted at the detention hearing with evidence that proved what is contained in the indictment is factually impossible. Counsel for the government could, at point, have made efforts to correct this wrong as it is their duty, but instead chose to post a new argument about an overlaid audio clip that was factually incorrect. Again, easily made clear with just a modicum of investigation. Given this window into how quickly the government could change course with a new incorrect factual assertion, Mr. Banks' concern as to what was presented to the grand jury is only further highlighted. This sort of egregious conduct by the government is what is appropriately considered when determining that dismissal of an indictment is appropriate. Damn, they saying, yo, they knew it was a lie. They decided to go with a lie. Y'all need to, aka judge, you need to go ahead and get rid of this right the hell now, as it is in this case. If the court is uncertain whether the false information that the government presented to the grand jury requires dismissal, the court should order the government to produce the transcripts and evidence from the grand jury's proceedings. So they want to know exactly what they told him. Should the court not yet be convinced that dismissal is appropriate, it can take the middle ground and compel disclosure of the grand jury proceeding that ultimately resulted in a return of the superseding indictment under Fed R. Crim P. The rule permits the court to authorize disclosure of a grand jury matter at the request of a defendant who shows that a ground may exist to dismiss the indictment because of the matter occurred before the grand jury. Given the timing and patent falsity of the challenge assertion in the superseding indictment, Banks has surely met the Rule 6E3 E2 threshold. He urges the court, therefore, to order the government to disclose the transcripts and evidence that led to both the original and superseding indictments. That way, the court can compare the prosecutor's presentations in each and discern when and how factual error arose. That's hard. I ain't gonna lie. That basically said, we want to know how the hell you even thought of this bull. Mr. Banks has already made this request to the government, but it refused him. The defense counsel and other efforts to elucidate the issue have not been succeeded. On January 28, 2025, the defense sought clarification by email about exactly what video the government was referencing that featured both TMZ news footage and the wonderful Wayne lyrics. The government responded that additional discovery would be forthcoming, but it proved and provided 2 links as examples. This about to get good, and I'm about to block these motherfuckers right here. Here you go. The handle of OTF Edit, the second was posted by My Mixtapes. So My Mixtapes is the reason for this shit as far as the lyrics go. I said it. The government made a discovery production to the defense on February 7th, 2025 that contains these. Similar with the long screenshots of videos, the problem with these productions, however, is that Mr. Banks did not create these videos and the government has failed to show any nexus between the manufactured video clips and Mr. Banks. Those videos were not created nor posted at Mr. Banks' discretion. The internet users who posted videos, including OTF Edit and My Mixtapes, are apparent fan pages maintained by people with no affiliation to Mr. Banks or only the family incorporated. The court should order production of the grand jury transcripts to clarify whether in charge of Mr. Banks, the grand jury erroneously attributed these other fan page edits to Mr. Banks as the government has clearly done. Conclusion. A prosecutor knowingly secures an indictment based upon false information or allows a falsely obtained indictment to persist, routes the grand jury from its central protective function. That is clearly what happened here. For the foregoing reasons, the court should dismiss the superseding indictment against Mr. Banks, and the alternative, the court should compel disclosure of the relevant underlying grand jury proceedings. God damn.